Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Hey, we are in the penultimate month of the year, and oh my goodness, hasn't 2024 been a ride? I don't know about you, but I am looking at the 3 Ps this year: personal, professional, and political. And I'm like, wow, this landscape for 2024 has been interesting. So if you are somebody who has also felt like this has been a bit of a roller coaster year for you, whether that's on the personal front, like me, with a house move, a significant leg injury, having my husband be away for two separate occasions for like 4 months the first time and 3 months the second time of the year, and spice it up with some family shenanigans and bereavements and births and all these things, then I hear you. 2024 on a personal front for me has been a year. Like, in fact, it's felt like about 5 years. Doesn't mean that it hasn't been good, but it does mean that some of those things have just meant I've had to really plan my sales activity differently this year, and meant that in some ways I've had less time than I normally would because I've been dealing with different things, mostly lack of Wi-Fi. Like that's been a real thing and theme that has come up for me this year, especially around house moves and stuff like that. So, we've had the personal that has been derailing people this year. We've also had the professional, so people professionally this year have been derailed. And I'm hearing from a lot of people at the moment, particularly on LinkedIn, because I've been talking a lot on LinkedIn and actually doing a lot on LinkedIn of free sales gap analysis pieces of work. So what I've been inviting people to do is let me know if they want a free sales gap analysis. I've been sending them over some questions, and from that I've been telling them, okay, cool, like in order of priority, these are the gaps that you need to be fixing in your sales process. And as a result of that, I've seen a lot of people who professionally this year have been finding it a struggle, and some of that is down to them focusing on the wrong sales activities or the wrong lead generation activities to generate B2B contracts. Some of it is down to shifts that they want to make in their business but are lacking clarity around. Some of it is down to more practical things, like just simply not knowing the steps behind actually achieving one corporate sale or repeatable corporate sales, or raising their prices or their average transaction values. So we've had the professional in there. I'm not going to talk about market in the professional piece because actually, we've heard lots of talk about the market shifting, and really that's been on a B2C front this year. And that's because of some of the political stuff that I'll come on to. But the market shifting in terms of the corporate space, actually not so much. What I'm hearing a lot about is that people tell me, oh, Jess, the market's really shifted. And what I'm seeing is my clients running clear sales processes and that are still winning business. In fact, in the C-suite, we've been celebrating this year people booking their first ever sales calls with corporate companies. We've been seeing people celebrate winning their first ever contracts with corporate companies. We've been seeing people celebrate their first 10K, 20K, 30K, even 6-figure contracts. And so, yes, markets will always change and evolve and grow and contract and things happen, but proven sales processes will outlive any changes and will carry you through those changes. So from a professional perspective, I'm seeing lots of sales process gaps and sometimes a lot of fear around identifying those gaps and actually plugging them. which is leading to a lot of problems. But we'll touch upon that in this episode and in future episodes. So if it's you and you're thinking, oh my God, Jess, I have a bunch of gaps. I don't know what they are. I don't know which is the best thing to solve that's going to help me get the best results right now. Head over to LinkedIn. If we're not connected, obviously make sure that we connect with each other, and drop me a little message and say, I would like a free sales gap analysis, because I love doing them and it will give you a really good idea of what areas you should be prioritizing for the results that you want. I will also, in that, give you a list of recommended resources that you should go and check out. Some of those can be free podcast episodes. It might be videos that I've recorded in the past. Some of them will be me saying to you, oh, this is quite a big area that you need to fix. You should probably go and get a ticket to Converting Corporates or buy this cold email course or whatever. So, just be aware, I will put a mix of free and paid resources in. We're all adults here. I'm also not going to turn up to your house with binoculars and force you in any way to buy them, but I will make best practice recommendations what you need to do. And from there, it's your choice if you choose to do them or not. Like, you can have the gap analysis and ignore everything I say if that's what you want to do too. Obviously, I hope that that's not, because it'd be a waste of my time and your time, but that's okay. And then finally, we've got political. Politically, this year has been interesting. So we've had, or we will have had by the time that this episode airs, 2 major world elections. So both the UK and the US are changing governments this year. We have other elections happening around the world. The political landscape is shifting. We have humanitarian crises and war and big climate projects that are problematic. Like, there's a lot that's going on. And there's a lot that we as individuals are not really in control over. And that is scary and difficult for a lot of people. And it also means that there are changes to businesses that perhaps people weren't always expecting, And I think that we have to look at, as business owners, what we can control sometimes. And, I was talking to people inside the C-suite before the autumn budget happened here in the UK, and I'm saying, like, there are areas actually here that are really positive if you are prepared to make the most out of them. There are going to be areas of growth. There are going to be industries that are allocated more resource, more money, more funding. And the associated industries with those will also be allocated more resource, more funding, and more sales as a result. And so there are positive things, even in difficult political climates, if you're prepared to look for them, And if you haven't listened back to the episode that I did when I came back from LA and the lessons I learned from Los Angeles, I would go back and listen to that episode, because that episode was very much all about this idea of spotting opportunities and whether or not you're the person who spots opportunities and makes the most of them, or whether you're the person who sits back and waits for opportunities to come to them, or, gets caught up in a more negative mindset around why things won't work or why it's not possible. And we're now at a time in 2024 when there are lots of things that we cannot control. There are lots of things we cannot do anything about, but there are lots of things that we can take absolute ownership and accountability and responsibility for. And whilst that's a scary prospect in terms of your sales and in terms of how your business is going, it's also, I find, liberating. One of the interesting things that I found through running a business is that everything that happens that is not ideal, right? So any time that my business has been lower down on revenue that I'd like, or any time that my business has been really busy with delivery and not allocating me enough time for work-life balance, any time that we've had bizarre client situations happen, anything that has happened in my business that is negative, that is my responsibility. I am responsible for that. I'm accountable for that. I take ownership. I get to take ownership of that. Equally, anything that's been good, anytime we've exceeded targets, anytime we've delighted customers, anytime we've improved our success rates, anytime we've done anything in local and international communities to raise money, donate money, support local causes, all those good things, also I get to take full ownership, responsibility, and accountability for. And obviously, when you look at this idea of ownership, responsibility, and accountability in your business, and specifically around your sales strategies, some days that feels better than others. So some days, and it's perfectly normal if you are sat at home thinking, oh, Jess, I don't want to lecture. Like, I get it. I have been the person, and I have been that person. I go through phases where I'm like, oh, I could have predicted this decision if I'd have really thought about it a bit earlier and done the right things. And I'm sure I will be that person again in future because I'm a human being. I'm flawed. Like, I'm not on some kind of giant sales pedestal where everything I do is perfect and perky and Pollyanna-esque all of the time. But I've been that person. I'm sat in my kitchen thinking, oh, Jess, 90 days ago, you did this, and this. And here we are now in this situation that you don't like. And here's how we can track this back. So if that's you, and you're thinking 2024 has not been the year that I wanted in terms of sales results, or 2024 has been a good year, but not the best year, or 2024 in terms of my sales results has produced some really great things, but also I still wanted more. I still wanted to increase my average transaction value, or I still wanted to increase my sales, or I still wanted to get more conversions from my lead generation process into booked qualified sales calls, like whatever that looks like, it's fine. You get to take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for those things. So if you're feeling uncomfortable about some of them, or you're not as happy as you could be with some of them, or alternatively, you're absolutely freaking thrilled with all of them, you get to take accountability, ownership, and responsibility of that. And I think it's really important. And like I say, some days I sit down in my business and I'm like, oh my God, I'm the business genius of the wonder world. And other days I sit down, I'm like, oh, good. So you are normal, whatever that looks like for you. What I will say is that 2024 has been a year where I've heard more than ever before that people want to make changes in their business, but that they are fearful of making changes in their business, specifically around their sales process. And I've talked about this a lot throughout different episodes of the podcast around the ways that the B2C market is changing and how that's impacting the fact that lots more people now do want to sell to corporate, but they don't know how to, and they're doing it badly. I've talked a lot about the fact that we're seeing lots of large entrepreneurs try to develop B2B revenue streams and are coming to me and saying, I need to develop this B2B revenue stream. It's really important to me now because my business is changing. I want more work-life balance. I want to be more credible and deal more with companies who are going to pay me instead of having some of the challenges that are unique to selling solely to consumers. And I talk to a lot of people who've been in the B2B space for a while, who've been making some sales with companies, but their sales are lower than they'd like. They're not pricing at the rate that they'd like to. They're in feast or famine mode. So they're doing lots and lots of delivery, but they don't have time to do business development, or they're not able to prioritize business development. And over the year, I've been very empathetic to all of these things because it sucks. And despite being the Jess or relative Jess robot that I am, I really empathize when people are not in the place that they want to be, because I've been there. I've been in that space where my business wasn't working like I wanted it to, or I didn't have the work-life balance that I set up my business for, or I've been in a job where actually I wasn't massively valued, and I've been terrified to let go of that because, like most people, I value financial stability, right? But I also take full ownership, accountability, and responsibility for where I am. And what I am seeing and have seen in 2024 is that sometimes it's been quite easy for people to blame external factors. And again, if this is you, this is not a lecture, this is an observation. The more time you spend blaming external factors, the market's changed, nobody's buying right now, everyone's charging less than they were, Loads of charities are giving away the stuff that I do for free. Stakeholders just aren't on LinkedIn anymore. Nobody wants to talk to me. This industry is completely going bust, blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, the less time you're spending on your sales process, the less time you're spending on the activities that you can control, the less time you are spending creating the results that you want in 90 days. And I get that observation can be really painful to hear. So if you are hearing it and you're like, oh, Jess, you're really tearing me a new one today, that is really not the intention. I'm not saying that everything in the universe happens to you because you create it. But in terms of your sales results, you really do. Personally, lots of things happen that you can't control. Professionally, some things happen that you can't control. Politically, well, yeah, unless you are a member of a democratically elected government party, then, there's very little that you can control. But with your sales, you can. And so I want to just give a couple of highlights to things that people have been concerned about this year and observations around what you need to do differently. Because what we will see in 2025 is that many, many more people are going to enter the coaching and consulting and training and speaking and done-for-you service provision market. And specifically the B2B coaching, consulting, training, speaking, and done-for-you service provision market. And the reason for that is that the online business bubble has really burst. People are scrabbling around trying to sell to all the newbies, and the newbies are like, absolutely not. We're smart. We're intelligent. We don't want to do this. We've seen a decade of things that don't work and crazy dreams that, are very, very specific and only for people who have thousands and thousands of pounds to put into meta ads. Not that I'm biased, but what? But also because we are seeing companies make shifts to their permanent headcount, right? So we'll see lots of very, very qualified, very talented people come out of industry because companies are making redundancies to reduce their permanent headcount costs, and they will go into the consulting and coaching and whatever space. Now, this isn't a bad thing, right? This doesn't mean that there's not enough work for everybody. It doesn't mean that the market's suddenly going to become saturated. None of those fears are going to come true, but it does mean that your sales process will become more important than ever before. Because if somebody else has a better sales process than you, even if they haven't been running their own business as long as you have, you're going to start losing work, right? You're going to start losing existing clients. You are going to start losing out on prospective buyers and contracts that you thought were a sure thing because other people will be running better processes. And that is all sales is, okay? In the B2B space, I'm going to say it, know, like, trust means absolutely bog all. Because know, like, trust isn't the reason the companies are buying from external suppliers, right? It's transformation that they're buying and understanding who is the best possible provider of that transformation. And that is demonstrated by having a really good sales process, unless you want to go and give lots and lots of things for free and then never get paid for your free consultancy. But that brings business problems all of its own. Okay, so the short thing to say here is that if in 2024 you've experienced being fearful around making investments of time, energy, and of course money into your sales process, you need to figure out whether or not the fear of staying where you are and your current results and the fact that people are entering the market, whether that is a better place to be than making a chosen investment into an area that needs support. And that doesn't, to be clear, this doesn't mean that you have to buy my programs and things. It doesn't mean you have to do my gap analysis and then choose to invest in the things that are gaps I identify. You can go and invest in whatever the heck you want and whatever you think your problem is that needs solving. If you have experienced over this year that you have invested in things but haven't fully used them, and you're like, oh gosh, do I really want to go back now to that thing and use it? Is it a bit humiliating or embarrassing if I admit that I didn't do the work and now I want to? You have to think about whether that embarrassment and sort of self-driven shame is worse than investing that time and energy into a resource that you thought was really valuable and using it. And ultimately, you also have to decide whether you want your results to be the same or less next year. Because unfortunately, if you haven't honed your sales process, and it's never your marketing process, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But if you haven't honed your sales process in 2024 and you don't in 2025, then there is going to be a shift in the way that your business is able to close certainly cold leads into corporate contracts. And that, unfortunately, is a factual observation as opposed to a big, scary, doom-mongering one. Because the reality is that when it comes to sales, because it is a process, if parts of your process are broken, then you will continue to leak more money out of them. You will continue to have more problems. And it's kind of like a leaky bucket, in that if you don't fix the first hole in your leaky bucket, the pressure of the water becomes so great that you spring more leaks. So at first, if you did a gap analysis and you found out, oh, okay, well, it's fine. Like it's just my lead generation process that, needs an immediate fix right now. If you do nothing about it, you will find that, in the first 3 months of not changing it, well, it's fine. You're probably still booking a couple of sales calls because maybe some people are finding you through your website. Maybe some junior employees are typing in, need an HR consultant or whatever, and they're finding you through your website. Or maybe you've got a couple of friends who work in corporate and they're introducing you to people at their firm. So the first 3 months, you'd be like, oh, it's all right. That leaky lead generation bucket isn't really an issue right now because I'm still getting a couple of calls, right? But over time, over 6 months, that leaky lead generation, it becomes a real problem because maybe you run out of warm referrals. Maybe your friends are worried about their jobs in their companies and they're not happy to keep recommending, an external supplier. Maybe you find that, your website hosting goes down or somebody else puts a load of effort in your industry to their SEO and they're getting all the inbound leads now. Suddenly, the fact that you're not booking sales calls with qualified stakeholders every single month from cold leads, that becomes a real issue. And it becomes a very urgent issue, a very pressing one that you want to fix immediately. And it is putting you into a real almost panic and crisis. That's a problem, right? Because what I'm seeing in 2024 is that people are identifying or have been getting support to identify issues in their business, specifically around their sales process, and then they are not fixing them. It's not to say that your fears around fixing them aren't valid. It's not to say that it's not a difficult decision sometimes to make around making changes when you're, even when something isn't working, it's really hard and scary to make changes around it because you're like, well, what if I make a change and it still doesn't work? Yeah, you get the mindset thing. It can also be really difficult and really scary to make an investment because you're thinking, well, oh my God, I've spent all this money on my business before, or my business isn't making the money I want to right now. If I'm just spending money, then this is scary and this is difficult. Like, there's no judgment around why people are not taking the action. There is none. But what I'm saying is I'm noticing this pattern where people go, yeah, I understand that that's my problem. I'm going to deal with it later though. And the problem with dealing with it later when it comes to sales is that at the first point that you identify that it's a problem, it's urgent. At the point that you leave it until it becomes untenable, it's a crisis. And a sales crisis is much more difficult to solve. Not necessarily from a strategic perspective, particularly if you've got ye olde bright spark like me in your corner. But joking aside, it's not necessarily strategically more difficult, but it will require more urgent action. It will require a more resilient mindset on most occasions. It will require investing significant time and energy and more money to fix than doing it when you first noticed the problem. Because at that point, it becomes a crisis. So it's led to other issues. It has impacted, if we go back to that leaky bucket analogy, it's impacted other areas of your business, your mindset, your cash flow. And so it becomes harder to solve. All right, for you personally, not necessarily the person behind strategizing the outcome, but it takes a lot more. So what I'm saying to you is that if in 2024 you've identified areas of your sales process that aren't converting, or that you're not happy with, or that you could do differently, or that you could be happier with, or whatever that looks like, please stop sitting on the fence about it. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't be is it flamingos that put their head in the sand? I don't know. Whatever bird it is, flamingos, emus, something sticks their head in the sand. Because sitting on the fence about it is only going to make your bum hurt, right? It's not going to fix the problem. So I think that the key thing in 2024 and going into 2025 is, if you're concerned about areas of your sales process, go and ask somebody. It can be absolutely me. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll do a free gap analysis, not a problem. But also be prepared to have an adult conversation with yourself about what you're going to do as a result. And if the answer is nothing, that's absolutely fine. That's totally fine. But just know what you're going into eyes wide open, right? If you get a gap analysis and it identifies a problem for you, and then you make the decision not to change it right now, just know what you're going into eyes wide open and be prepared for other gaps to arise, and be prepared that at some point you're going to have to deal with the ongoing impacts. Okay. So if you're looking at, this year I've actually done really well in terms of sales, but I've worked really, really, really hard. I've done lots and lots of delivery, and then I've been in feast famine because I couldn't prioritize BD. I want you to be sat there at the end of this year having a conversation with yourself about, well, I couldn't prioritize BD, but did I actually go and look at ways that I could have implemented a strategy? Is there something that I could have done? Because in 90 days' time, not doing business development now is really going to impact my sales results. So is it that I couldn't do business development, or is it that I didn't know what I could do with the time that I had available? Because those are two quite different situations. Yeah. If it's that you're thinking, I really loved working on the projects I got to do this year, but actually I have found that I had to take on lots and lots of projects because my average transaction was low, I want you to dig into, well, why was that? And was it a confidence piece? Did you not have the confidence to ask for a higher rate? Or was it a competence piece? Did you not maybe dig into how to price your services effectively? Is there something you could be doing differently there? And like I say, if you're not sure where your gaps lie, please do drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'll do a free gap analysis. There is no judgment, and there is also no hard sell on anything. But I will give you recommendations for podcast episodes, like I say, videos that I've recorded. And if it's relevant, I'll recommend paid resources that you may want to consider investing in as well. Okay. The final thing I want to say about today's episode, and I'm aware it's been a slightly different episode than normal, so, interesting, is that I learned a really powerful lesson recently. So I was sat at home one night, I was eating fish and chips alone after I'd been to running club. So, balance. But Owen came home. He'd been to a talk at work given by somebody who was formerly in the SAS and is now on television on the program Who Dares Wins, which I think is supremely cool. I actually really wanted to go, but it turns out that they were not wanting, partners there, which was unfortunate. I'd have bought a ticket. But I got the highlights when Owen came home. I was very excited about this. And it was interesting because The person was talking about the arduous selection process that most of us have probably heard about or read about or seen on TV, of joining the SAS, one of the most elite special forces in the world. And the training process and the interview process is incredibly, incredibly tough. It's designed to push people to their mental and physical limits. And you know what's interesting about it is that if you're injured at any point, you fail. You're removed from the selection process. So even if that injury was not your fault, you're still removed from that selection process. If you fail a module, so if you fail a test, if you fail, say you get there and it turns out you can't read a map or whatever, then you also are removed from the selection process. And you can only actually do the selection process a couple of times. You can't just do it endlessly. It's not like a driving test, luckily for me. And the final way that you can exit that selection process is if you quit. So there are 3 methods, essentially, to leaving that selection process: injury, failing, or quitting. However, you can have multiple attempts to get through the process, but you can only return to a selection process if you fail a module, so if you fail out of the selection process, or if you're injured. So if you get injured, whether it's your fault or not, you can return to the selection process and start again, right? In both of those cases, you can return to a selection process, but you must start from the beginning. You can't return to a selection process for the SAS if you quit. They won't let you. And the reason is that in real life, you don't get to quit. And I think that's something that's really powerful, because when I look at business owners this year, and I've seen a lot of business owners in the weeds this year because of that triple P: personal, professional, political stuff. And I've seen a lot of people who've dug really deep this year, and they've kept on. And it doesn't matter whether they've had an hour a week or 20 hours a week, they've knuckled down. They've done their sales activities. They've invested time, energy, money into fixing the gaps that they wanted to improve. They've gone ahead and they've created amazing results in the face of adversity that maybe you and I and some other people haven't experienced this year. And I think that that is something to be really, really proud of. It doesn't mean you can't quit things, but it means that as a business owner, you get to come back from injury. You get to come back from things when a process doesn't go correctly. I had it earlier this year. Actually, I had a tech fail. It's hilarious. Where I'd said that ticket prices were going to be a certain price for a certain time to convert in corporates, and then our tech failed, and it all went to crap. And so I put out a little thing on LinkedIn. I was like, whoops, hands up. I'm now that person who looks like they sent out, oh my gosh, my tech failed, I'm so sorry, email. And people were very, very gracious. And I was able to return from that renewed, and feeling like I wasn't a spammy McSpammerson. I've had things in my business where I've completely failed. 5 years ago, I shut down a business that was making money, but that I hated. So I quit. I failed. I had to announce to the world that this thing that everybody was telling me they wanted, I was shutting down because I didn't like it. It didn't give me the work-life balance or the fulfillment I wanted. For me, that felt like failure. But I haven't quit on my sales process. Not ever. And so when people say to me, oh, Jess, it's all right for you because you're in sales, or it's all right for you because you know how to sell, or it's all right for you because, you're really confident, or it's all right for you because you've done XYZ things that make it easier, I always smile to myself and I think, yeah, it's none of those things. It's the fact that I've never quitted on my sales process. Not once. Not in 2024, not in 2023, not in any other year. I get up and every day I do 3 things that are going to drive my business forward in terms of profit, in terms of revenue, in terms of booking sales calls with qualified decision makers. And I would urge you to do the same into 2025. And if you're not sure how to do that, that is okay. Come and find out. Drop me a line on LinkedIn, drop me a little email, say, Jess, I want a free gap analysis. I'm putting myself into the ring to get told where my gaps are so that I can be responsible for fixing them. Because in 2025, that ownership, that accountability, that responsibility piece can either feel overwhelming and negative and full of self-loathing and blame and criticism, or you can choose to take the steps and identify the gaps and plug them however you want to plug them, regardless of whether that's with a paid or free resource. And it can feel very, very different. You can feel in control. You can feel like you have a predictable sales process. You can feel pleased with your progress. It really is up to you. So if this has been the year that has injured you a bit, where you feel like you failed a bit and you want to make a comeback, then let's do it. We've got a whole 6 weeks of the year left. We have a whole 2025 with a blank slate. We've got loads of opportunities that we can choose to spot, to leverage, to do something about, or not. The choice, as ever, is yours. Over the coming weeks, we've got some excellent episodes coming up. And if you haven't gone back and listened to some of the amazing case study episodes that I've produced of late with some of our amazing clients, then please do go back and have a listen, because we've had some fantastic people come onto the podcast recently, including Lucy Gordon, Jennifer McDonald-Nethercott, Ros Adwan, and more, who've shared their breakthroughs from this year and previous years to create best practice B2B sales processes that work for them. And we've got more of that coming up into December. I'll be running some really special episodes around things that have been working this year, some trends and insights that I'm spotting for next year. And of course, some super secret squirrel stuff coming up too that you will only find out about on the podcast. So I will see you in the next episode. Have an epic week.